Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the Berlin Summit so far. And thank you for joining our session today, where we're going to help you build safe and responsible generative AI applications using Guardrails in Amazon Bedrock. My name is Olympia. I'm a solutions architect at AWS. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Olivier, who is also working as a solutions architect at AWS. So for today's agenda, we want you to take the following points out of this room. First, I'll be talking about some of the challenges that we see our customers face when they build generative AI applications. Then I'll be explaining what guardrails for Amazon Bedrock are, how you can use them to build safe applications. Then I will go and do a live demo on the following steps. First, we will create a guardrail, then we will test it using the foundation models that are in Amazon Bedrock, and after that, Oliver will be taking over for the second half of this presentation. He'll be talking about agents for Amazon Bedrock, how are they valuable, and how you can apply guardrails to Bedrock. Oliver will also be showing a demo at the end of his part. Let's kick it off. So we have all seen how generative AI has fundamentally transformed multiple industries by powering some use cases that were not possible before using traditional approaches. Generative AI has significant potential to boost the employee productivity or to enhance your customer experience. Let's start with the most basic use case, chatbots. With a quick show of hands, how many of you have built or at least used generative AI chatbots? Okay, so that's expected, right? Almost everybody had the hands up. However, apart from chatbots, generative AI has multiple other use cases, like document search or document summarization, or helping the software engineers in this room with code generation, or in business intelligence with generating visuals and reports. So we can see that generative AI is pretty powerful as it can do a wide variety of tasks. However, it also comes with a whole new set of challenges. Let's have a look on these challenges. So first, because the foundation models are so powerful and they can create information, can generate information about a wide variety of topics, you would probably want to avoid topics that are not desirable or not relevant in the context of your application. You as application developer need to make sure that the interaction between your application and your users is safe and is adhering to the company policies. Imagine you are building an online banking assistant. Now, you would want your assistant to answer questions such as, how can I apply for a credit card, or how much is my balance? However, you do not want your online assistant to be talking about investment advice, or to be answering questions about tax evasion, as this would involve some financial crimes. So it's a challenge for you to be able to resolve these denied topics. Secondly, a challenge is toxicity and harmful content. Imagine you have an e-commerce website and you have an assistant. You probably want to avoid your assistant including hate speech or violence. Moving on to another highly important challenge, which is about user data, or what we call personally identifiable information, or for short PII. Now, you would want to redact this information. Let's take an example of you wanting to generate conversation summaries after an interaction between users and between your agents in a call center. So in these summaries, you would want to avoid the user data in order to protect their privacy. And this is something that you need to resolve. And the last challenge I want to be talking about is about biases and stereotypes. So you as application developers need to make sure that you promote fairness and you avoid the propagation of biases and stereotypes in your application. Now, multiple foundation models that exist in Amazon Bedrock come with pre-built protection against harmful content. So they would be able to respond with a safe response back to the users. And the foundation model providers, they have used different techniques in order to incorporate these protection mechanisms. However, these protection mechanisms, they are model specific. So that is not enough for you to build safe and responsible applications. Usually when you build a generative AI application, you need further customization, tailored to your use cases, tailored to your company's AI policies. For example, you might want to avoid certain topics, like the use case with investment advice. Or you might want to avoid certain words, like your competitor's name. Or in case you're using multiple foundation models, you might want to have a consistent safeguard across these foundation models. This is why we have launched Guardrails for Amazon Bedrock. And it went generally available this year in April. Now, what are Guardrails? Guardrails for Amazon Bedrock help you help you implement generative AI applications that are customized to your needs, customized to your responsible AI strategies. And how do they work? Actually, before I explain that, I want to tell that before launching Guardrails, we talked to different customers, including regulated industries, in order to understand what are their requirements, what does safeguards mean for them. And after hearing their requirements, we launched Guardrails for Amazon Bedrock. Now let's have a look how they work. So the way Guardrails work is that they intercept both the user input and the generated response from the foundation model, and both of them are evaluated against a set of policies that you define in the guardrail. Now, each guardrail has 4 different types of policies: deny topics, content filters, word filters, and PII reduction. Now, what happens every time there is a violation, either on the user prompt or on the generated response from the guardrail to these policies, what we do is that we block the original response from the foundation model and we send back to the user a pre-configured message. Now let's have a look at all of these policies one by one. The first one is deny topics. So here I want to bring again the example of the online banking assistant. You don't want your assistant to be giving investment advice. So what do? You go ahead and you can create a deny topic. You give it a name, for example, investment advice. You give it a definition, that's important, that tells the guardrail what do you mean with this investment advice topic. And you can also add some sample phrases. Sample phrases are representing the user prompt. And that's how easy you can create a deny topic. Now, every time a user prompt or the foundation model response includes a deny topic, we will block the original response that comes from the foundation model, and we will send to the user a pre-approved message. Moving on to the second policy type that we have in Guardrail, which is content filters. Now, this is about preventing toxic and harmful content. And it comes with different categories, like hate, violence, sexual. What you can do is you can configure the filter strength for each of these categories. The higher you put the filter strength, the less will be the probability that you see this content in your application. So you would have the filter too high in order to be sure. And you can do the filter strength adjustment for both the prompt from the user as well as from the foundation model. Moving on to a third policy that you will have to set up in the guardrail, and this is word filters. So what are word filters? Just a list of words that you do not want to include in your application. It can be your competitor's name, it can be any other word that you want to avoid. Now, apart from the word that you provide to the guardrail, we help you and allow you to enable profanity filter. This is a list of profane words defined globally. So if you don't want them in your application, you just enable this profanity filter. And the last policy that you can configure in the guardrails is the PII reduction. And here we have two cases. The first case is when you have an application that does not have to do with PII, does not deal with PII data. In this case, we just want to block the user prompt and send back to the user a pre-approved message. However, you can have another scenario as well. And the second use case would be when you deal with applications that have to deal with PII. Like, for example, the example that I took before with generating some conversation summaries between your agents and users. Now, in this generated summary, you want to redact the PII data to replace it with placeholders, so you protect our user privacy. And as you can see, there are different PII types that you can choose from, but we'll also see that in the live demo. Ready for the live demo? Before I start, I want to highlight again what we are going to do. So first, we are going to create a guardrail, walking through all the steps of setting up policies. Secondly, we will be testing the guardrail if it works as expected, using any foundation model in the Bedrock. And thirdly, we will monitor it, sending the logs to CloudWatch and monitoring the logs produced by Guardrail. All right, so I'm going to change the screen so I can show my browser. OK, so I think it is visible, right? So currently I'm in my AWS console in the Bedrock page. What we want to do is hit the button Get Started. As we see, a left panel pops up, and what we're interested in is the guardrail section on the left. So I click on that, and we are right now in the guardrails page. Let's go and create our first guardrail. And remember, you can create as many guardrails as you want. I'll click the button Create Guardrail, and before I give it a name, I want to let you know that let's have this guardrail about the banking assistant. So let's go with that example. So let's call it Banking Assistant Guardrail. We can also give it a description, but it's optional, so I'm going to skip that for now. I click on Next, and we go into the first policy configuration, which is content filters. If you remember, it was about toxicity and harmful content. And we can do that for both the prompt as well as for the responses that come from the foundation model. So what we have here, we can adjust the filter strength to medium, to high. Now, as we put it to high, the less will be the probability that we see, let's say, hate in our application. I'll leave everything to high, and I'm going to the next step. Next step is denied topics. So here we don't want our assistant to be giving investment advice. So let's add a denied topic about investment advice. Let's click on the denied topic, give it a name, let's call it investment advice, and a definition. So I had already copied that. Let's give it a definition so the guardrail understands what does it mean, investment advice in this case. We can add sample phrases, as I showed before, but this is optional, so I'll just go and confirm. Remember, you can create as many denied topics as you want. We can have another denied topic about financial crime, like tax evasion questions. But we are good with investment advice for now. Let's go on and see what we have next. It's word filters, like the list of words that we don't want to include, like competitors or anything else. I don't have anything for the sake of this demo, but I still want to enable the profanity filter where I want profane words to not be part of my application. Moving on, and here we go to the PII. As we see, we can add a new PII, and we can choose among different types of PII data, like general one, like name, phone, email, or finance-related, like credit card number, and so on. I want to capture names, and now let's see what are the behaviors that I can pick from. We can either pick a block behavior, and that would mean that every time we detect name as the PII, we send an approved message back to the user. Or we can pick mask, and that means that if the foundation model response includes PII, then we will redact, we will replace the PII with a placeholder, and then we will send it to the user. So I'll go and hit mask. And here we go to the last step, which is defining the blocked messaging. As you can see, we can define blocked messaging for the prompt, as well as for the blocked responses that come from the foundation model. So let's say for the first one, sorry, the prompt was blocked. And that means that the prompt will not even be forwarded to the foundation model, but will be immediately blocked, and this approved message will be sent. Sorry, the prompt was blocked. We can also do the same thing for the foundation model response. We can say, sorry, the model response was blocked. Moving on, this is just a review page. Here we can edit our configurations. Looks good, so we just go and create the guardrail. So what we did so far, we created a guardrail by configuring different policies. Second thing we want to do, we want to test it. That is easy because it comes with native testing capabilities. So what we have to do is simply creating on the banking assistant guardrail that we just created, and we can go and select a model from the foundation models that exist on Bedrock. So I click on the orange button, select model, and here we can pick of any model. I'm going with Anthropic Claude. All right, so now it's time to test it. Let's first start with a question that we expect to pass all the policies, so to not flag anything. Let's maybe ask a question like, how can I apply for a credit card? For a credit card. I click on Run. Let's see what Claude will send as a response. And also let's see what would be the final response after guardrails have kicked in. I would expect that nothing will change from the response that Claude will give, and that's what we see. So if you see the model response on the first area, this is the response that Claude gives us, and we see that the final response is the one we sent to the user, and we see that guardrails didn't take any action. If we want to know more, we can click on the button View Trace, and here we see if any policy was violated. So right now I'm in the Prompt tab, and I see that nothing was violated, and guardrail did not take any action. And the same I can do for the model response. So all looks green, as expected. Now, let's go on and ask a question that we think will actually trigger a policy, that will violate a policy. Maybe something related to the investment advice. Something like, should I invest in stocks? Looks like an investment advice question to me. So what we see here, for the model response, we see a minus. And the minus means that the prompt was not even sent to the foundation model. Because in the prompt, it was detected that there was a violation. And as we see here, in the view trace, in the guardrail, in the prompt, we see that denied topic was violated. It was detected an investment advice topic. And the behavior was blocked. And we see the final response, sorry, the prompt was blocked. That's what we would expect. Maybe let's go ahead and test the toxic language. Should I invest in stocks? If you cannot answer, you're stupid. Let's try it out. If you cannot answer, you are stupid. Click on Run. Again, you can see that the response is very fast because it doesn't even get to the foundation model. We understand, the Guardrail understands that there is a policy violation and immediately sends to the user, sorry, the prompt was blocked. And if we go to the trace, we see that now we have violated not only the denied topics, but also the content filter. And in this case, it detected an insult, confidence is high, and the behavior is block. Last test, let's check the PII data. Let's ask a question like, who is the CEO of, let's say, Amazon? So the question, we got the response. We see that the foundation model, the Claude, tells us that Andy Jassy is the CEO. He took over from Jeff Bezos. However, in the final response, we see that Andy Jassy and Jeff Bezos are actually replaced with a placeholder. And if we go into the trace, we see that the prompt actually didn't trigger any policy violation because the question was all good. However, when we go to the model response, here is where we generated some name, and we wanted this name to not be shown. That's how we configured the Guardrail. So what we did in here, Guardrail has detected sensitive information, detected PII type of type name, and the behavior was masking. So it looks like the Guardrail that we just created works. You can, of course, test it with other foundation models on Bedrock, but I'm good to go. And next step, in order to deploy it in production, I would go and create a version. So I clicked on the button, create version, and what happens, you can also give it a description, it's optional. What happens is it creates a snapshot of this Guardrail at this point in time. So I'm going to click create version, and we're good to go. So far, we created the Guardrail, we tested the Guardrail with Claude foundation model. Last step, let's look at the logs. So what we do for that, going one step back, and I'm going to settings here on the bottom left. So what I have done is that I have enabled logging, and I want to send the logs created by Bedrock to CloudWatch. And I have already went to CloudWatch, created a log group called Banking Assistant Logs, and that's where we will find logs produced by Guardrail. So if I go to my second browser tab, where I have my CloudWatch, our monitoring service, going to the log stream inside Banking Assistant Logs, we should be able to see all the logs produced by Guardrail. Let's maybe look at the last one. So what we see in here, in the input, we see, for example, the question that we asked, because I opened the last log, this is the last question, who is the CEO of Amazon? And if we go down, go to the output, here in the output, we see the response that was sent to the user, because we can see that the name is redacted with a placeholder. And down below, we should be able to see the model output initially, so without reducting the names. And here on the bottom, we also have different PII types that were detected, like Andy Jassy and Jeff Bezos are PII type name, and the action that Guardrail took was to anonymize it. All right, so going back to the presentation. Should be this one. So I want to make a summary of what we did before I hand it over to Olivier. So what we learned was how to create guardrails, going through the steps of setting the policies, how to test guardrails with using foundation models that exist on Bedrock, and the last part was how to monitor it, sending the logs to CloudWatch. Now I'll be handing over to Olivier, who will be talking about agents from Amazon Bedrock and how to apply guardrails to agents.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, now we have seen how we can create guardrails, how we can apply guardrails, and how we can monitor them. And now let's see at agents for Amazon Bedrock and how we can apply guardrails to it. So before I start, who of you is familiar with agents for Guardrail? So only very few. So in that case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you an overview of agents, of what it is, how it works, and then we're going to see how guardrails can be applied in that context. And as a first step, I'm going to show you a demo how you can actually create that agent and apply the guardrails to that application. Agents for Amazon Bedrock allow you to automate multitask steps. So we use chain of thought prompting to orchestrate the user request and invoke APIs or also retrieve other information from other data sources to perform the user request. So the way you do it is you create an agent and then you add action groups, and those action groups contain APIs, so you could invoke APIs, and then you could add data sources. To that data sources, you would also interact in a secure way, so you can, with that application, retrieve that data, and finally you can interact with that agent. So let's take an example. Let's take the insurance example that Olympia just shared. Let's say I'm in a banking scenario and I want to process insurance claims. So with insurance claims, I want to see, okay, what are, for example, the open claims, what are pending documents that I need, and maybe I want to send a reminder. So for that, I can create an agent, and that's what you see at the bottom. So I say you're an office assistant and you help to manage insurance claims. Then I also define a set of APIs. So I have 3 APIs here, like get open claims, compile docs that are pending, and send a reminder. Now you might also want to ask other questions as you interact with the agent. And therefore, you can also add additional data sources to do that. And finally, you have a single API through which you can interact with that agent. So now that we have that overview, let's go a level deeper and see how it works. So again, if you remember from the first step, we have at the top, again, the agent, which contains the instruction to the instruction provided by the developer, what it is, what it should be doing. And in that container, you can think of it as a container, you have action groups. So within that action groups, you define the API. So you have an API schema, and then you have the Lambda reference. In the Lambda reference, you reference to a Lambda function that contains, again, the implementation of different APIs. So API 1, 2, 3. So that would be the APIs that we just mentioned before, like get all claims, compile the docs that are pending, and send a reminder. And outside of that agent, we have the data sources. So the data sources, there you define the source location, what's the source type, and then finally also the credentials to interact in a secure way. Now, let's say we want to apply guardrails. So let's take the example from before. Let's say we are building we are a banking company and we're building an application that should be processing insurance claims. Now, this is what should be doing, right? I don't want, if I'm, for example, asking for financial advice, I don't want to get an answer on that because it's not what the agent is supposed to do. I want to focus it on insurance claims. So for that, I want to have guardrails that intervenes and comes back with a question, with a polite answer saying, "Hey, sorry, I cannot help you with that," and because that's the company policy that we have here. From an architecture point of view, it's still the same. You'll still have the agent, you have the API groups, and you have the data sources, but you also have the guardrails that apply to the agent itself. Now let's see here. Here I have brought a screenshot of from the AWS console of an agent. So we see we have at the top the action groups. We have a second container with the knowledge bases. And then as a third one, the guardrails. So this is, again, where I can apply the guardrail for my agent, which has been created outside of, like Olympia showed us how to create it. And then we have a prompt editor, or the advanced prompts, as we call it here. On the right-hand side, you can see a test console. So you can see there's a chat. In there, there's a user input asking, tell me about banking. Now, the guardrail has detected that, and it blocked the response. So it came back with an answer, in this case, just, oops, blocked your response. But could be any response that you wanted to give. Now, when it comes to guardrails, you can add the guardrails just from a drop-down menu. You can also test it right off in there. So for the guardrail itself, again, just to highlight here, sits outside the agent. So you would create the guardrail just as Olympia showed you. And once you have done that, you can select it from the drop-down menu. OK. Now, let's see a quick demo on how you would create an agent. Then we're going to apply some guardrails. And finally, we're also going to see how you interact with it. So here we are in the AWS console of Bedrock in the agent section. And here we click on Create Agent. So again, here we take our insurance example. So we give it a name, like Insurance Claim Agent, and we provide it a description. Now here it's important to note, the description is not the instruction we want to give. That will be in a step in a second. It's just for admin purposes, just to know what this agent will be doing for you. We also add some other configuration, for example, permission settings, some KMS keys that you want to add to have a secure connection, and then we hit Next. Now here we select the model for the instruction. So this will be the underlying foundation model. And here, let me just pause for a second the demo. So this is here really key. So this is where you give the instruction to the agent what it should be doing. So in this case, we say you're an agent who can assist in insurance by listing all open claims, pending paperwork, and send reminders to the policyholders. So that's here you want to be as descriptive as necessary, because that's going to be used to perform the actions on behalf for you. So we're going to create a prompt that will have the action plans underneath to orchestrate the different actions, calling the APIs, and so on. So this is really key here. So that's going to be, so we're taking care of taking advantage of the foundation model to actually perform that plan. Now, below, you see the guardrails. With the guardrails, again, we see that we have guardrails defined outside of agent right now. So here we have the banking guardrail, as Olympia showed us how to create it. And here we want to prevent or steer away from the conversation for financial advice. So you don't want to answer questions, for example, which stocks should I invest in? How do I balance my portfolio, etc. So this is, again, just to show, this is in the guardrails section. So once you have created that, so we're going to select this one now in our drop-down menu, and we got good to go with the guardrail. Now here we define the action groups. Here again, we give it a name for the action group. Here we have an insurance claims manager. We might give it a description. And if you remember, we have the Lambda function and the API schema. So for the API schema, just to show here how it looks, and again, just pause very briefly. Here in the API schema, you define how it will look like. So you give it, for example, you have the path of claims, so you can get the claims. We give it it's a summary and also description. So as you see, description also takes up quite some space here. And the description here is also key because that's what the agent is going to be looking for as well, to understand or to how it can interact with it and how it can be used. Now here we have defined the different APIs, or not defined like in the schema of the APIs. So also the outstanding paperwork. And again, here you see the description, which is quite detailed here. We also send reminders and other information that is important to know for that API. So this is based on the Open API specification, and where it lives here, it lives in an S3 bucket. So we have a JSON file in the S3 bucket. And here again, back in agents, we're going to reference that Open API specification. So here we have our insurance claims. And then second, we have now the Lambda function. So here, just briefly in the AWS Lambda console, where we have defined our Lambda function for the insurance claims. And in here, we have the actual implementation of the APIs. So you go here and actually return the data. You create the responses. And you could also be talking just or referencing and calling another backend system. In this case, here we see, okay, the application is just giving back the data that we want. Then, as a next step, what we do is, so yeah, we have implemented that. That's in the Lambda function. So we select it here in the drop-down menu. Now we have the API schema and a Lambda function for our action groups. Now here, optionally, we could add the knowledge bases. We're going to skip that. And then you have that review page. So we review our settings, what we chose, what we did. And if we are satisfied, we click on Create Agent. And once it's created, we are ready to interact with it. So we can interact it, for example, with an API. But in this case, for the demo, I'm just going to use the test console on the right-hand side. Now let me ask you two questions. In the first, I'm going to ask a benign question. Can you show me all the open claims? Now, while we wait for the response, on the right-hand side, you might see you see a section for the trace. So the trace allows you to see what's happening under the hood. You can see what the agent, what steps it's performing, what prompt it has been doing to fetch the information and creating the response. Now we'll see that the agent comes back with a response. Here we see it comes with the open claim IDs, claim 123 and claim 06. And we click on trace, we see that exact details for our trace. For example, in the step 2, we see the API path that was called, like claims, and we see also what was the response. Here the claims 123 and 06, and it used that to create a natural language answer for the user. Now let me ask a different question here, which should be blocked. So can you tell me about my 401k benefit? So a US pension model. So in this case, as it's related to financial advice, we might do not want to have an answer here. So instead, Guardrails should detect it, and once it kicks in, come with a response that we defined in the guardrail. So here we see, okay, sorry, prompt is restricted by the guardrail. Again, here we could click on the trace to see what has been happening under the hood. And again, the trace is also really beneficial to see, to have some visibility what's actually happening under the hood. Okay, so this was about the demo. Let me recap here. So we have seen, you might remember this slide from just before. So we create an agent, we add some action groups, we add some data sources, and then we have an agent which we can interact with. Now, the part that we also added here is we applied guardrails. And those guardrails allowed us to build an application that does not interact or engage with topics that we do not want to. Okay, so I'm really curious to see what you will be building with Guardrails. So if you want to learn more about Guardrails, get more information about it, you can scan this QR code. And otherwise, yeah, next time you're building AI applications, think of the safeguards that you want to implement and how Guardrails can help you with that. Have a nice rest of the summit. Thank you very much.